We need to consider the time constraints. Time in distance education becomes a real serious issue. It is important for the teacher to remember that there isn't as much time to work with the students, both individually and in large group, as there is in a traditional classroom. So we need to consider what's important in the curriculum and what needs to be perhaps dropped out because of the time limitations. We need to also consider the numbers of concepts that students are going to be developing, not only within a single lesson, but within a series of lessons, within the entire content of the curriculum. We need to consider how the time is going to be an important variable, and also how we're going to sequence those so that they're meaningful to the students. We need to also look at alternatives for our students. We need to consider how we can help the students not only in the origination site, but at the distance sites. It's important to consider how we can achieve individuality when we're working with students at a distance. As we consider the planning process for curriculum, we also need to consider how we're going to judge whether or not this educational event for the student has been effective. And so as a result of that, we need to consider very seriously how we're going to go about evaluating not only our students, but evaluating our curriculum, evaluating our teacher, and evaluating the distance learning experience. When we talk about evaluating our learners, there are a number of different considerations we need to bring into play. First and foremost is we need to consider how we're going to get the information to and from the students. We need to look at the network for distribution of test materials or getting materials from students. We need to look at the technology and how does that help or hinder this process of assessment of the student. The tool of technology may in fact be an excellent way in which we can in fact interact with our students, or it may be an interrupter in our interactions with our students. We need to look at the communication process between students and teachers. This may be adversely affected by students at the distance. They may not be as comfortable or as open with their teacher. And so it is very, very important for us to consider how we can judge those students from a distance. When we're talking about evaluation of the curriculum, we're not only just talking about the evaluation of the learner, but we're also talking about evaluation of the learning experience. And as we examine the learning experience, we need to look at certain issues about the effectiveness of the curriculum as a total whole. This is especially important as we're dealing with a distance education environment. First and foremost, we need to look at the issue of time and how it impacts the amount of information that we want our students to gain meaning about. When we talk about time, we're also talking about it in terms of the essentials of the content. It may be necessary for us to drop out parts of the total content. If that is in fact true in terms of the delivery, we need to consider about ways in which we can get our students to get that information in alternative means. When we look at sequence of information, we need to make sure that it's not being affected by the distance or by the time constraints that we've dealt with earlier. We need to look at sequence in terms of making sure that the information is presented in such a way that it's sequential and logical to the learners. And then finally, we need to look at the learning experience itself. We need to systematically and systemically consider how the content and the distance have affected the learners and how they have gone about learning the information that we want them to gain. The curriculum reflects the systemic approach to the teaching learning process and is developed to enhance the students' learning. Distance learning will impact the curriculum. There's no doubt about that. It's just a matter of looking at the nuances of the technology and how the teacher interacts with students and content to be sure that the curriculum will in fact be addressed in a way that is meaningful for students, effective in terms of the outcomes, and will in fact make it an easier, beneficial kind of experience for our students.
Sharon, you mentioned that distance delivery takes more time. Does this mean that the educator has to drop content out of a course, or are there other alternatives?
It isn't always necessary to drop content. It may be important for the teacher to consider alternative ways of getting that information across to students. It may mean supplementary materials. It may mean extra reading outside of class. It may mean changing the homework assignments. It may mean changing the way in which we assess our students by having them write papers or do some outside activities that they can bring to class, demonstrating that they've gained the information, but not necessarily part of the class time.
Thank you, Sharon. And thank you for watching the Foundations and Applications of Distance Education.